It's so wonderful to be here. I'm here with some friends and colleagues today, and we're going to have a great discussion on international volunteerism as it relates to the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. With us today are Richard Dickus, my good friend from the UN, the Executive Coordinator for UNV, all the way from Bonn, Germany. Thank you, sir. Diane Melly, Vice President and Partner in Service of Global Citizenship for IBM. And we also have my former supervisor from the Peace Corps, the director of the Peace Corps, the aptly able director of the Peace Corps. And then Susan Reichley, counselor for USAID. I did some work with Susan. I also consider USAID to be partners in service, and we did some great work with Peace Corps and USAID.
And return volunteer. Also.
And a return volunteer. Susan, you have a multi-part question. I'm going to ask that you consider the time as my chief job is to keep us on time.
Yes.
We do want to hear from our audience, and I think they're chomping at the bit. So, question for you. How can international development resources be utilized in a targeted manner and multiplied with the use of volunteers to further the SDG 2016 goals? Or 2030 goals, but also I would like for you to also reference, if you can, how USAID has engaged volunteerism over the history of the agency.
Great. Well, thanks, Corey, and congratulations to BBC on the 10-year anniversary. It's great to be here. I know we want to get to all of you, so thank you for that broad question, which I'll try and hammer on it, because I think, you know, the stories that the previous panelists told really capture the history of volunteerism. It is something that is very much in our DNA. It is part of who we are as a society, and really civic participation. With USAID's 55-year anniversary, Peace Corps' 55-year anniversary, this year, it's based on volunteerism. So whether it's going back, as you asked, Corey, what's our history? You know, we go back 30 years working with the Peace Corps, doing small grants programs, giving small grants to volunteers in order to do what Carrie was talking about, really building the capacity at the host country level, training others in order for it to be sustainable. Because ultimately, volunteerism is important and absolutely should be applauded. It's the core of our society. But how do we help other countries then reach those sustainable development goals? I see has changed really dramatically over the last several years in volunteerism is that the old model used to be us going in and volunteering for a period of time and providing those skills and the training and the technical assistance in areas that were critical for other countries. But the difference that we have seen lately is really what Carrie touched on, and this is building the local capacity, local volunteerism, because that's how you get to scale. Volunteerism overseas is ultimately how we're going to achieve, I believe, the Sustainable Development Goals. Because
yes. Richard, what are some of your key ideas with regard to the role of international volunteer service in addressing the 2030 development goals, and how is UNV poised to equip volunteers?
Today, as I sit here, I represent 6,800 very brave and resourceful men and women who work with the United Nations. These people come from 180 different nationalities. They work in 122 different countries with nearly 30 United Nations agencies, anywhere from UNICEF to WFP to UNDP to the Department of Peacekeeping Operations. The United Nations cannot deploy without volunteers. The United Nations cannot deliver peacekeeping mandates, Security Council mandates, political mandates without the input of these volunteers. But the volunteers are the human face of the United Nations. Think of them as the amino acids of Sustainable Development Goals.
Diane, our good friend from IBM. So over 10 years, the Building Bridges Coalition has been connecting with corporations around key development goals and issues. Highlight for us, if you will, some of the corporate service trends that you're seeing in the space, those that you've witnessed and those that you've implemented at IBM.
Looking collectively at companies and a very unique opportunity for companies to engage together is in something called Impact 2030. This is a private sector-led collaboration between the UN, several NGOs, stakeholders, and at this point, 60 major companies have come together with the objective of collaborating to mobilize and align their employee skills-based volunteerism programs to directly and substantially contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is companies from around the world coming together with 4 objectives. The first, to promote awareness of the goals, to really make sure that they are a voice that is loud and clearly communicating what the Sustainable Development Goals are, that their employees and the members in their community understand what those goals mean and how they can be translated and acted upon in their local communities. It's an opportunity for cross-sector collaboration and cross-industry collaboration. Very importantly, and one of the reasons that I think we jumped on immediately onto Impact 2030 is that collectively we will build frameworks for measuring the corporate sector's contributions and assessing how corporates are making a difference in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Very importantly, the 4th objective of Impact 2030 is regional voice networks and action teams. So not just promoting and being aware and talking about it, but actually engaging with leaders in service in communities around the world to hold regional forums, which have begun to happen around the world. We were just in Spain, just had a convening in Hong Kong, and we're talking about engaging people from the corporate sector at the highest level in the local area. So,
Carrie Hessler-Retland, and I'm going to direct your question around the idea about what Peace Corps is doing specifically in terms of its volunteer impact for its Sustainable Development Goals, around the role that Peace Corps should have in engaging volunteerism against the Sustainable Development Goals. So can you talk a little bit more about what Peace Corps' role is in that?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Corey, and thanks to all of you for being here. We basically do it in 3 ways. We are positioned for impact in 3 different ways. The first is the way that I think we're most known for. It's the amino acids of the SDGs. It's the community development work. I like that. I'm going to use that quote in the future. So we equip our volunteers to be catalysts of community-led change. So that's number 1. The second is that we are working very hard in the communities in which we serve internationally overseas, 65 countries around the world, to foster volunteerism. That's a main strategy of ours. And then the third is something that we're doing very closely with the Building Bridges Coalition, with all of you, with IBM, with UNV. And that is exactly what we heard Stan McChrystal talk about. It's trying to create a culture of national service back here. I also want to mention our very good friends at the Corporation for National and Community Service. I want to talk specifically, though, about the work that Peace Corps is best known for because it is our bread and butter. And that is equipping our volunteers to do the important work that they do overseas. Because as I looked at the 17 SDGs, I see that Peace Corps volunteers and their communities are directly working on more than half of those SDGs at the community level. We are there at the invitation of our community. We are there to help them to build local capacity, both individual and institutional capacity, to achieve their own community development goals, so their own SDG targets at the community level. There's a Peace Corps volunteer named Ian Hennessy. He lived in the Kédougou region of southeastern Senegal, in the area of highest malaria prevalence in Senegal. And Ian was part of a community health team. They were community health volunteers who had been trained by their government to do case detection and treatment of malaria. But they had a very passive model. They sat back in the clinics and waited for people to come to them. Then PMI came along, the President's Malaria Initiative. It's led by USAID, but it's a whole-of-government initiative. And they enlisted the support of Peace Corps volunteers and their community health teams in distributing bed nets. And it was a wonderful thing. People in that remote corner of Senegal were getting bed nets for the very first time in their lives. And it was a great thing. And Ian and Sheikh, his best friend, who was the head of this community health team, felt very good about this work that they had done in distributing bed nets. And they realized that they needed much more. The community realized that they needed much more. So the community came together, led by Sheikh, and identified a new way of looking at things, an innovative way, and it didn't involve technology. It was a new way of doing their work, which is instead of waiting for people to come to their community to get malaria treatment, they were going to be going out to the community, doing proactive case detection and treatment. Ian, our Peace Corps volunteer, brought this to our country director. Together they went to the National Malaria Control Program to see if they were comfortable with a different approach. The National Malaria Control Program said, okay, let's try it out. Let's give this a go. Ian and our country director went to the Centers for Disease Control, which was the monitoring and evaluation partner of the President's Malaria Initiative. They agreed to do a simple case control study. They did a little baseline survey of Ian's village and then another village about, 11 miles away that had the same malaria incidence rate and the same bed net coverage rate. And they were the same. So then they tried their proactive case detection and treatment initiative over one rainy season. At the end of the rainy season, what they found by going every single week and proactively seeking out and treating that malaria, there was a 90% decrease in malaria incidence in Ian's village as compared to the control village, and no deaths from malaria that year. For the first time in anyone's memory, no deaths. Great example. That's a single example, but it's a powerful example of the impact that volunteers working with communities alongside, shoulder to shoulder with communities, can actually move the needle when it comes to development.